Hello, all. This is Vaibhav Puranik, and you're about to listen to a very interesting topic that should concern all of you. And today's topic is how to negotiate while buying a property. You can save thousands of dollars by negotiating the right way in buying property. And to discuss this, we have a guest who has done this many times. And he does this for a living. And his name is Abe Sharma. And he's the managing broker at AV Brokerage. So, Abe, welcome.
Thank you
So,
so much for having me.
absolutely. And so, before we begin, right, why don't you just tell us more about yourself and your brokerage firm?
For sure. And I'm super excited that we're connecting, and I've been checking out your YouTube channel, Webbo, and just love how much information you have in all your videos about the different parts of real estate. And in terms of myself, I grew up in India, actually. I was born in North India. And growing up in India, you get to see all kinds of things, including housing related hardship, very much in front of your face. And I came to the US when I was 15. And as a family, we ran into housing issues ourselves. I remember living in Boston in a basement and climbing 2 flights of stairs just to get a bucket of hot water and realizing real estate is a big part of the American ecosystem. And I got myself started in real estate in 2009 with a single family home that I started renting by the room, taught myself how to do that. And then a few years later, started bought a fourplex building, taught myself how to do pro formas, how to screen tenants, interview property management companies. And that's when I was going to UC Berkeley, getting my MBA as well. And other people became interested, and we raised capital about $1.5 million to purchase about 25 different doors in Sacramento, San Diego, and including Ohio as well. And then at the end of the fund, it was about 15 to 20% IRR for all the investors involved. And when I worked in commercial real estate last year, I was realizing something, which was like, I was really good at just connecting people and finding these deals. And we realized that that's what brokers do. And a lot of that is what we could bring to the table. So my business partner, Ricky, who's a CPA, and I started this AV brokerage firm. And it's really a specialized firm, really focused on multifamily deals and really making sure we're really trying to understand what our clients are really looking for long term. So really excited to be here. And I feel like we've picked a great topic to talk about.
That's very interesting. So, you actually started as an investor and then you moved on to being a broker. I don't think I know anybody who has done that. So, I think it's very interesting. Um, so, but another question is, so this AV brokerage is like a independent brokerage firm, right? Like you're not affiliated with these bigger firms like Marcus and Millichap, CBRE. Yeah, can you explain us that a little bit? Like, why is that? Like,
For sure. And I think, there's all kinds of different retail brokers, there's independent brokers, and we're choosing to have really full control of the process in terms of who we want to work with and also the clients we want to really serve. So we don't have thousands of clients. We work with, a few individuals and a few funds, and that's really what we focus on. And everybody, has a different choice when it comes to brokerages. What I say is there's really the way you look at it, there's sort of transactional brokers, and then which is sort of could be discount brokers, but then there's also the quality brokers. And real estate tends to be very relationship based. So I think in the long term, really what matters is working with people who are really relationship focused. And that could become, so for us, it's really bringing that to the table, bringing our property management connections, bringing our contractor connections, bringing off-market deals, just making that available and working hard for the clients. And I think, and we also work with the larger brokerages as well. So I'm actually connected with the folks at Colliers. I'm connected with other companies as well Because again, it's a very relationship-based business where maybe our client actually wants to buy an office building. Well, actually, I was having a coffee earlier with a broker from an office firm as well.
Okay, so that's now I have more questions about this whole thing, right? Because I'm curious about how these brokers work and how do they exactly, who is a broker, who is an agent? Because sometimes people use that word interchangeably, but I think as far as I understand, an agent and a broker are two different things, right? And so can you tell us, our listeners, a little bit about what's the difference between an agent and a broker?
Yeah, and I love your curiosity about these things. And I think it makes sense, right? Because on surface, it can feel like everybody's the same. And so in the state of California, the Department of Real Estate, which is the authority for regulating the licensing for agency relationships of real estate, there's two levels of brokers. There is salesperson, and then there is a real estate broker. So a salesperson is essentially a person who is more junior. They're going to be actually hanging their license to speak to a broker. A broker tends to be more experienced. So in terms of what somebody can do and what somebody can't do, brokers can independent, like they could run their own brokerage. They can also do property management as well. What generally ends up happening in the industry is many salespeople will hang their license with a broker, and there will be a revenue sharing agreement. Now, on the topic of sort of, again, since we're going to talk about negotiations in a bit, also, one of the things you'll notice, and a lot of people kind of don't know, pay attention to this, when it comes to purchase agreements, especially it's very clear if someone's buying residential, there's actually a broker's name in all those purchase agreements. So even though, let's say, a salesperson talks to a client and brings that deal together and is sending all the paperwork, but if the client actually really looks closely, they have a direct relationship with the broker of the salesperson. So in terms of when we, again, start thinking about negotiations, at the end of the day, it's about relationships, but if you think about the number of people involved, if you work with brokers, you're actually working with more experienced folks. We're also, and also maybe less number of people involved as well. So that's sort of some of the differences, and that's how it could impact negotiations as well. And if somebody wants to really know if like Abe Sharma or next person is a broker or actually a salesperson, you can just go on the DRE website and dre.ca.gov and actually put in their license number, and it'll say whether they're a broker or a salesperson.
And I noticed that you were using use word salesperson. Is that same as what we call agent colloquially?
That's right. And it's really great question too. And there's many terms actually that are being used. So there's salespersons, there's agent. Agent is really representing somebody who has a fiduciary duty to somebody, to a client. So a salesperson is just an agent, as well as broker is also an agent. Another term that gets thrown around is actually realtor. So interestingly, realtor is a copyrighted term that's, it's actually copyrighted by like the
National
NAR
Association
or,
of Realtor, yeah. That's good.
yeah, so
Good.
it actually is not really regulated by the DRE. So it's interesting. So when someone becomes a member of the National Association of Realtor, they can use that term realtor.
Okay. Thank you for educating some basics before, we jump into the conversation.
For
Um,
sure.
so yeah, why don't we begin with the topic of the day? Um, let's say, you know, one question that I always had was, when does negotiation really start, right? Because I was under the impression is that, you know, it's when you place an offer, that's where the negotiation starts because you're you're naming a price. And now the other person will either accept the price or say that, no, I don't like this price, give me more. Nobody says give me less. Um, so is that how negotiation starts, or where does it exactly start?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And, a few things that come to mind is like these concepts come to mind. One is anchor. Like, what is an anchor? And then second is having a strategy. And then third is just, there's just something just like rapport building. And fourth is a concept called BATNA. And I'll talk about these four things in a bit. So essentially anchor, what is an anchor? Essentially, it's kind of, first impression. It's kind of like a first impression. I was trying to remember, so when I was selling a condo in San Diego, all the comps for Zillow and Redfin for this condo were in the 400s. And, I was like, my own understanding of the market, my own comparison of the market was that actually, this is going to be more in 500s, and actually listed the condo in that price. Well, the next day, actually, Redfin and Zillow updated their estimates to be in 500s. And a few months later, well, actually, a few weeks later, we started receiving offers around that number. And it was interesting. So, I think, that's a good example of anchoring the market, anchoring something where the buyers are now seeing, oh yeah, this is a condo close to the beach, or like it's now in here. So that's an anchor. And strategy is essentially the second part, which is one strategy is just understanding the motivation of the other party. So like what that means is there was a deal in Sacramento, for example. We were actually looking for we weren't looking for like a 4-unit building. We were actually looking for a multi-unit, maybe like 10 or 12 units for the investor group. And then we found this 4-unit building. And as we did more due diligence, we realized that the seller actually had more properties. And they were literally next door. So there were actually 3 4-plexes right next to each other. And so then we started talking, and then eventually what we realized, we were able to buy it wholesale, and a wholesale price meant we bought all 3 for about $100,000 cheaper. And I think that was an interesting model learning too, where during the negotiation, instead of focusing on just one unit, we focused on the whole. And in the end, it worked out better for us too, because we ended up selling each of them individually. And that actually produced good returns in the end as well. And I think, and I could talk about the other two as well, rapport and BATNA, but I'll pause there, in case you have any other questions
No,
on
but I
those
mean,
two things. Yeah.
I think what I was asking was what I could get from your answer is that the negotiation starts even before an offer is placed, because you have to find out stuff like, oh, what is the motivation of the seller? What offer can work, what price can work, and that kind of stuff, right? So it's not really, does that make sense? Or when does it, or does it start at the offer place? Because even though you're trying to find out all of these things, buyer and seller are not engaged at that point, right? You're just trying to do research about the property. So there's no negotiation at that point, right? Am I correct?
Well, I think it's yes and no. So one of the things is it might feel like when two people talk is actually when the negotiation's happening. But it's actually, there's a lot of preparation as much as you can learn about the different parties. And like the example I give is essentially there was this large REIT, public REIT, that we wanted to build a good relationship with. Then and we found out who the decision maker was. And then eventually we sat down across, like, with him and I just had lunch and in one of the places in San Francisco. And we hit it off and it was great. And then we sent over the agreement afterwards. And there were no red lines. There were no negotiations. It was just like done. So what I mean is like that, those types of things where even before, I learned a lot about this person beforehand and like did my research on who this person is, and just understanding who that person is and being genuinely curious about them really helps build that actual negotiations, because it could have been a very lengthy negotiation where, this REIT had many legal representatives, they had property managers, everybody was involved. But once you sort of had a good rapport, it really helps facilitate the deals. And as brokers, that's what we're doing a lot, which is really bringing all these parties together and making sure facilitating a smooth transaction. And then again, before meeting somebody, knowing your BATNA, which is best alternative to not having an agreement. And we work with our clients to make sure, and this is really more of an emotional preparation, and which is like not falling in love with the real estate investment. There are times when you have the strong offer, but and even then you don't end up getting a deal. So we're always trying to make sure there's one or two other options, so you're mentally prepared to walk away. Or like, so we always ask our clients, are you okay, like if you don't get this deal, are you going to be like okay with that? And I think that's like having that other option is always helpful. So I guess what I'm really saying is like having before that first interaction with that on that deal, really understanding who are the parties involved, planning your sort of BATNA and reservation price, and really having that understanding is really where the negotiations start. So it could
It's like a
start
preparation for
before.
negotiation, right?
Yeah,
Because without knowing all of these things, you're not going to be able to negotiate properly.
exactly. And a big takeaway as I'm thinking about it more too, if you're not gonna to negotiate properly, and this is one of the exercises we did in business school, we would actually sit with lawyers, and our professor would be right next to us. And what would happen is the person would talk, and then we would talk back, but we would actually have to repeat back what they actually said. So it's really like what is lost in that conversation. A good negotiator actually listens to what the other person's saying, because you can miss very important details that were actually really important. So one of the books I really enjoy, I highly recommend to anybody listening, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie,
So
right?
yeah, and a big takeaway is to just listen and be genuinely curious in people. And I think that's how a good negotiation gets done, is by listening.
Right. That's fantastic. I think I think there's one more wisdom that you said that I realized is that you can also avoid negotiation by having good relationship, right? Because if you have a great relationship with somebody, then there might not be any negotiation. You said there were no red lines, right? So, and avoiding negotiation is even better because then you get what you want, right? Perfect. Yeah. So why don't we talk about like types of negotiation? Because, for example, I think earlier I used to think that the negotiation is just in price. But I think there are other things you can negotiate as well, right? And that can result into monetary benefit to buyer or seller, right? So can you talk about that a little bit, like price versus terms?
For sure. And it's really, the big thing here is like most common levers people think that they can modify, let's say in residential, are things like inspection timings or faster closing. And really what they're driving is a faster closing, let's say, lets the seller have the money sooner. An inspection contingency removal lets the seller have the security that, okay, well, the buyer put the deposit down, and that's going to be at risk if they're going to walk away from the transaction. So there are definitely other things that can be part of the negotiation. And we've had, and it's really trying to understand both of the motivations. And one of the few questions, and again, it goes back to the preparation. So besides the price, what could be the other terms? Well, it comes to understanding, number one, what are the timelines of the seller? So I was just talking to a seller's agent and they were saying that the seller wants to move out of the country. So my next question was, is there a timeline for that? Are they trying to move out of the country? So you like understanding that is important. Maybe they're trying to get out within 60 days. So, or within 30 days. And maybe an attractive offer means getting everything done before then. Understanding again, like I was talking, if they have other properties in the area as well. What is the motivation of the seller? And you know, I remember one of the deals in Sacramento where it was, this was actually one of the fourplex deals, and the seller 1 week before closing is like, I want more money. I want 15,000 more dollars. And everybody was just really uh, anxious at that time. Like, what is this? We're 1 week from closing. This doesn't make sense. I called the seller. We sat down for, again, for lunch, and it was Mexican food. And Richard, he's a 75-year-old man, and he sits down and we talk for an hour, not about real estate. We talk about, you know, how his faith was really important, how his family was really important to him. And I learned that he has so many properties in Sacramento. And then at the end of the hour, I'm like, okay, well, I know you have a team of contractors that can fix a lot of things. What about putting in a new driveway, painting the whole place from outside again, and fixing these XYZ things? Well, he pulls out his calculator, he does the math, and he's like, yeah, I can make that happen within a week. And we shook hands, and actually he became a mentor over time. At the same time, again, these are types of terms where I was able to get these, what we would call deferred maintenances that I would have had to do. I know I was watching some of your YouTube videos where, you know, you've done upgrades to your laundry in properties and those types of things. And if you can get those done already as part of the closing process by someone else, that's great. So I think those are some of the other terms. And I'm sure, you know, you've done some negotiations of other terms yourself as well, right? About where you maybe brought some other things into contract.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think terms negotiation is often ignored, and price negotiation is given a lot of weightage. But I think to me, they both have the same effect. And that's why term negotiation is also very important. Uh,
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. I think, and also just putting it almost, yeah, sometimes those terms can like save you time and money, and actually at the
time
end of
and
the
money.
day.
Yeah. Now, the important thing is some of my friends, right? They keep telling me, "Oh, you don't need a buyer's agent," or you know. Um, so I want to know, like, what value does a good buyer's agent or broker, right, adds? Because I think there is some misunderstanding with people that you don't need a buyer's agent. They don't add any value.
Yeah, I think it's really, and it's real estate is a big decision for a lot of people. It's a big investment, and whether it's, you know, residential or commercial, whether, because sometimes it's other people's money that's also involved as well, and it makes sense to use trusted advisors as part of that conversation. And the way I think about it is essentially what helps uh, accomplish that transaction, who's really going to be vouching for you at the end of the day in that transaction. and and so there are times when, you know, people would actually be able to have a transaction and that's completed, and that's where it's like we have the transactional side of things and the quality side of things. And where if you get one transaction done with working with somebody and then that's it, that's done, then there's sort of the quality side of things. There's quality brokers. We're really trying to, who believe in that it's never just one deal. And that's where we are, sort of quality brokers. We're trying to make sure and representing buyers and making sure it's not just about that one deal, it's about that relationship, and making sure it's not just about closing them, but making sure that helping them even stabilize that asset, staying with them, and is there value in repositioning that asset and other things. Just trying to understand and bringing sort of a team-based approach as well. So I think and when we think about negotiation as well, you want to have essentially trusted parties, people you trust in the negotiation representing your interests. So maybe, you know, thinking about what types of conflicts of interest could be present if you have somebody talking to both parties. And that is so I'm not entirely saying like it's not possible. So there are people who do dual agency. So there are agents who are able to represent both buyers and sellers, and that happens as well. And I think it really comes back to the comfort level and trust where what is the answer to that question when you look at that person and say, are they going to be able to transparently represent my interest when it comes to? And at the end of the day, you're talking about a difference of commissions of like a few $100s to potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of impact on the deal. So that trust could go a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I myself have tried to explain them to them that you need your own advocate, right, in this whole process. And that's what you're saying essentially, that you need somebody to represent you, somebody to put your interest first, and that could be that person and help you in the negotiation, sort of guide the conversation. And even in reality, when people say that brokers are incentivized to close the deal, I feel like most people don't actually have that in mind. If they say something obviously wrong, they're going to say that. They're going to point that out. At least that's what my experience is. Uh, do you agree with it?
Totally. And I mean, it's our like fiduciary duty to actually let's say there's any material defects with the property, like you have to actually tell the person because anything that impacts value, making sure that's released. For us, like we definitely don't we work with again, we choose to who we choose who we work with. So we really don't want to put somebody in a bad deal or at least we want to do our best to have a good due diligence part where and I think because at the end of the day it's about that relationship and so that's part of it.
Great, great. Now I have a tricky question. Okay. I Let's say there's a seller's market. Okay. And in my opinion, there's not much room for negotiation there because, they're going to get seven offers, and whoever is the highest, they're going to give that property to them. Is that true? Or can there be a negotiation in a seller's market as well?
Totally. I think it's a really and what's wonderful is like this is a very timely question because a lot of markets are sellers market. So and I think this is where this is a few things come to mind. I think this is where a buyer's broker, this is an opportunity for them to shine. What that means is let's say there are seven offers. Understanding what are the offers like? Are they cash offers? Are they offers with maybe questionable financing? Are they offers where they want the seller to do some financing? What are they like? Uh, just trying to understand as much as possible. And on surface it might feel like the same thing, but it might be everybody's different. Maybe someone's actually has a long timeline and what is it going on? The second thing is I would say, in real estate, there's two things that really matter that drive a lot of the things: lending and insurance. So what is behind that property? Like what is actually the finance situation of that seller? Is it paid off property? What's going on? Like what is it? Why are they selling? And really just trying to understand those key points as well. And at the end of the day, the insurance could be an interesting point as well. And where a lot of markets insurance prices have gone up. And I think, understanding that ahead of time is helpful as well. So I think those two things come to mind, which is making sure understanding what are those other offers actually, are they real? And also what is the situation of the seller and understanding if they have any timelines or any things that would be really beneficial to them.
Right, right. I think this is an important thing, which is what you said is that price might not be the always the criteria to select people. And there's so many other things that you need to seller might be looking for. Perfect, perfect. Now, one more thing is, I think you do commercial properties, right? Mostly, which is like investment properties, if I understand correctly. Um, What is the difference between commercial properties and single families negotiation? Is the negotiation different in both cases, or is it the same?
I think the way I would think about it, the school of thought that I have about it is when it comes to like single family or someone's residence, it's about quality of life. And what that means is someone will pay premium for improving their quality of life. It's really for that part. I think that becomes really important. There's actually a really good book about sort of understanding that difference, which is it's by Wall Street Journal, Complete Real Estate Guidebook. And I highly recommend that for anyone really starting in real estate, because I think it is helpful because a lot of people come from residential and they start to go into investment properties. And there is this emotional aspect of it, which is, yes, for a home and a single family, many times people actually pay a little bit more. When it comes to commercial property, it's the income. The income generated becomes quite a bit important. So what that means is what is currently the income of that property? And what is the potential future income of that property? And that really can impact negotiation, and not just negotiation, it can impact lending as well. Because the lender is going to look at the property more, essentially the sponsor, the party borrowing, their credit matters more in residential. But then in commercial, the property and its income is going to really matter. So when it comes to negotiation in residential, you're really talking about things that might improve quality of life, and you're negotiating for those. When it comes to commercial, really focusing on reducing risk and increasing income. And negotiation is structured around those things and making sure, the ROI, return on investment, is maximized.
Right, right. So I think, yeah, so single family decision could be emotional versus I think the investment is more rational and more objective. Uh, Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Um, I wonder if you have have any failed negotiations and then some lessons coming out of them. Uh, do you have any failed negotiations?
Sure. I think one of the, at least I would say, is like one of the recent ones we had was where we had a client that was looking at properties and we toured several of them. And then there was a property that they liked. And then there was a back and forth in the negotiations. And at the end of the negotiation, it was interesting because the seller ended up increasing their offer.
Hmm.
So they actually wanted more money than they had
Listing
already
price, yeah.
told. Yeah. So that became a strange thing, where, but so essentially it became like, well, can you entrust this negotiator? Because now they said, it'll be $10, but now they're saying it's $15.
Right.
So, and so that became an interesting, so I would say that's a failed in the sense, well, if we had seen that coming, like these are essentially people you want to orange flag or red flag for our clients, because again, for a client, it's very frustrating. Lucky for us, we had set their expectation again to not be on the emotional side. Like if we get this property, great, we're negotiating based on the income of the property, what numbers, the pro forma that works. And if it doesn't work, we're going to walk away, and they were okay with that. And they were happy that we actually didn't get into contract with somebody who actually kind of takes back their word, because who knows what happens when you actually get into. So in some ways, I would say it was brighter for us that, so the lesson was, again, back to strategy, like understanding what type of people you're negotiating with and making sure that you can trust them. And so I think, and for us, it was actually lucky for us to not actually be in contract in this situation.
Right. That's great. That's a great example. Um, so are there any resources for our listeners where they can read more about like negotiation style or, like uh, any more information about it?
For sure. In my own experience, one of the best trainings for negotiations is there's a company called Keras
But there's
Training,
actually training
K.
for it. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
there's a training for it because you can like it's essentially like sparring boxing. You can, sit down and they don't have hundreds of instructors. I believe last time they only had 60 instructors in the US. So they're quite elite in the sense. And they'll teach you in a few days, sort of like really negotiations and what are the different ways you can get really an extra edge. And maybe if you're, listening to this, you can ask your supervisor if they're open to, because maybe your role could require some sort of negotiation, and you could benefit from that. So, and then the other thing would be, and I've attended that training and I learned, several things from it, and I use them daily. The other thing is understanding your negotiation style. So, if you understand your negotiation style, a lot of times people end up negotiating with somebody who has a different negotiation style. So once you know your own, or you can identify other people's, then you understand maybe in team-based situations, maybe bringing in the right people. Maybe you bring in someone else for negotiation and those types of things. So those are the two things I would say, looking at the KRS training and then also really understanding your negotiation style.
That's great. Thank you. I think there's a book also that's very famous, Never Split the Difference. And that's for the FBI, the famous FBI negotiator. I think his name is Chris Voss. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't know that there was a training for negotiation. So it's good to know that, you can actually take the training. Um, so thank you for that. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it was great today. Like I learned a lot. And if our listeners want to reach out to you and possibly even engage you in their deals, can you tell us like how they can reach out to you, or and what is the area in which you practice? What area is your brokerage firm deals in?
For sure. So I would say, the best way to reach out to me is my cell phone. It's a 978-273-3952. We can also email me,
We
A
can put it in the
Sharma.
description. Yeah.
Yeah, 8080@gmail.com. And we're licensed for California. So AV Brokerage, we're focused heavily in the Northern California region and have invested ourselves in this region. So that would be our expertise. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share that with people.
No, that's great. And we'll also put the link for the training that you suggested. We'll put all of that information in the description of the YouTube video so that our listeners can get that. Uh, Again, this was really great. Thank you very much. Um, Thank you for making time for this conversation.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Again, love your videos and keep up the great work.
Thanks.